And hello once again. We're still at the Zimbabwe Alternative Mining Indaba #Zami 2022, and we are discussing gender and climate change. And I'm joined by a lady who is passionate about women's rights, gender, and extractive. Please welcome to the show, ma'am, and do introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you, Sinemimbo. My name is Nyaradzo Mutonhori. I'm the Programs Manager at Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, and I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you very much. Yesterday, she was presenting on women in extractive communities and the gender face of climate change. So climate change has a great impact on people in those communities which rely on natural resources for their livelihoods. So in your view, how is gender inequality and climate change interconnected? Where is the relationship?
There is a huge relationship between gender equality and climate change, because climate change exacerbates the already existing inequalities in the communities. So when we look at our patriarchal system, we see that women do not have equal access to land. And yet, at the same time, women rely on land and the resources that are on land for livelihoods. We know that even at a household level, if a child is hungry, they don't go to say, Papa, can I have food? They go to the mother. So that gender role of being the provider of food and, literally just also putting food on the table for the family creates a pressure, a certain amount of pressure on women. And when we look at climate change, the droughts, the floods, and increasing incidence of those, climate emergencies, women then are more and more marginalized and placed in a very vulnerable situation, because they can no longer, get the certain amount of food from the land that they were getting before. They are also not able to get even products like wild fruits and other natural resources that they would be getting to supply food on the table and to enhance their livelihoods. And so that is the relationship that is there. And what we also see in that scenario is that women are not really able to participate in terms of the solutions. Their voice is not heard because when we look at women, they have been disadvantaged when it comes to, for instance, education for a long time. So they may not have the technical knowledge in terms of how to participate in crafting those solutions. And then the second issue that is there is that in public spaces, the participation of women in decision making is limited because of the notion that women's place is in the kitchen. What is a woman doing in the public space, talking about issues of climate change, talking about issues of access to land. And the other issue that is there is that in terms of being power brokers, women are not seen as power brokers. If, for instance, a corporation is getting into the community, they don't view women as power brokers. They look at traditional leaders, they look at political leaders, and in that space, it's also a largely male-dominated space. So that is the situation that is there. Okay. Yeah.
So Nyaradzo was sharing on the relationship between inequality and climate change, on how already there's an inequality prior to the climate inequality or the climate injustices. We already have gender inequality within our Zimbabwean society. So do you agree that women suffer more with the consequences of climate change more than our male counterparts? Because when you look at, even if it's like you mentioned, that a child will not go to their father to say, I'm hungry. They obviously go to the mother. And if the father is not there, that means the mother has to make a plan. So do you agree that women actually suffer more when it comes to climate change than our male counterparts?
Definitely, women suffer more, again related to the gender roles that women have. So for instance, if we look at issues of the rising levels of water scarcity due to droughts, this means women are traveling longer distances to fetch water. And then if we twin that with the demand of water by mining companies, so you are in a community, it's a mining community, already there is limited water supply, and then a mining company is coming in to also use that little water that is there for processing their minerals and so forth. So that places a huge demand in terms of the unpaid care work and the hours that women spend just looking for clean water sources. And if we look at situations where there are emergencies that are as a result of climate change, if we look at flooding situations, we have seen that even in terms of mobility, men can easily escape or use the evacuation option faster than women. Because as a woman, you want to see where are the children. I need to carry my children. Do I have enough supplies for me and my children? In most instances, we find that the people who die in climate emergencies are mostly women and children in comparison to men. Yes, so there is, that overlap there between, enabling women to participate in the decision-making space, viewing women as power brokers, not just victims in this conversation that we are having, and making sure that we have policies that respond to the lived reality of women as a group in this situation.
Okay. On that issue of women and bearing the brunt of climate change, people felt that COP26 was, in a way, tackling this issue of the gender imbalance that is there when it comes to climate change. On the road to COP27, what are some of your recommendations? When it comes to ensuring tackling climate justice, climate injustice, and gender injustice? Because, like you mentioned, we can't be fighting climate injustices without also tackling the gender inequality which is in our societies. So on the road to COP27, how best do you think, with the Zimbabwean context, we can tackle gender inequality to ensure that women are also leading when it comes to climate change solutions and action plans?
Thank you for that question, Chinewimbo. So, as Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, we are working with other organizations in the climate change working group, where we are doing consultations, grassroots level consultations on these issues. And it is critical that we include not just women, but also we look at young women in this particular discourse around, pre-COP 27 consultations, to get the views of young women in terms of the practical and concrete steps that can be taken to address the issues and bearing in mind their lived realities. We need to have a multi-stakeholder dialogue approach. We cannot continue to divorce the processes of the government consultations and the consultations that are happening at CSO and grassroots community level. We need to combine, that process and come up with a solid position that Zimbabwe can then go with to know COP27 as a national perspective on the issues.
Okay. I told you when we started that she's passionate about women, gender, and extractives, and you heard how she mentioned that as ZELA, they're also working on, and I recommend a multi-layered stakeholders approach to it, that we have people at the grassroots and young women talking about their own lived realities, so that when we tackle climate change as a nation, that way we're doing things that actually relate and work for the people on the ground. I'm going to go to one of your passions, which is extractive.
Yeah.
So when you talk about mining and the environment in Zimbabwe also, what are some of the key issues when it comes to women and land rights? I'm sure, bearing in mind that you've been a ZELA and you've been on the ground with these extractive cities and towns like Wangi. So what are some of the key issues or problems when it comes to women and land rights in the extractive communities?
One of the key problems there has been, the issue of access to and control of land by women. So we have seen, like for instance, due to mining activities, there are so many communities that are facing the threat of possible relocations, whereby, to pave way for mining, land will be taken from the community members.
And then mining
companies come in and they start operating mining activities there. The problem we have is that we do not have a clear relocation policy in Zimbabwe. That means that even when we come to issues of compensation for the relocation exercise, it is not clear. And when it comes to who is compensated, because women are accessing land through marriage, or through their brothers, or through their fathers, when we are looking at who to compensate, we look at the head of the household, who is the father, the brother, or the husband. Yes, and when a company is compensating, the compensation fund is received by that individual. Yet, as I said before, it is the women who work on the land, who rely on it to put food on the table. So those are some of the serious challenges that we face. And even if they are relocated and taken to a new place, we saw it in Ada Transao, that community where they were relocated to pave way for diamond mining in Chiadzwa. There are basic amenities that need to be there: clinics, schools, access to clean water sources, and so forth. And then all those issues need to be addressed. And the question is, whose responsibility is it? Is it going to be the government's responsibility, or it's going to be the investor and the company that are coming in to do the mining that needs to make sure that all this is in place before the relocation? So there are serious problems that are there because of that policy gap. And as ZELA, we are looking at developing a model relocation and compensation regulatory framework to really nudge, give a soft nudge to the government to really look at addressing these issues, because there's going to be more mining happening, not just in Zimbabwe, but everywhere in Africa, to provide those minerals and metals that are required for the energy transition. And we have really been out there to say there is so much energy poverty already. Rural women have no access to energy in the first place.
Before we talk
about a transition. So let's look at the system that was there before, why it failed to provide energy to women. And we need a systematic change, so that when we are now talking about an energy transition, we make sure that it's also providing energy equity and providing rural women with energy.
Okay.
Yeah.
She mentioned, you mentioned the Transal area, and I think back in the day we also saw documentaries and footage of how some of the houses were actually falling apart. Some of them were substandard houses, and some were saying we're far from amenities. But because they have no choice, literally, we all know the drama that happened when people were relocated to pave way for diamond mining. So I like how you mentioned that we actually people need to be compensated, people need to be consulted. So that gap, that policy gap needs to be closed. In closing remarks, how best can Zimbabwe tackle the gender imbalance in the extractive sector?
We have laws and policies globally that are in place. The only gap is the implementation.
So it's all on paper?
It's all on paper. Our constitution says it, no one will be discriminated against, equal participation in key economic sectors. So if we are looking at the mining sector, even in terms of participation of women as economic actors in that space, it's still very limited. How many women own mines and own mining claims in Zimbabwe? That's another debate that we can have. But clearly the numbers are not showing that gender equality that we speak about in the Constitution. When we talk about representation of women as in decision-making spaces, again, we need to address the participation of women in that space. And when we talk even about the supply of goods and services to large-scale mining corporations, how many women-owned businesses are able to supply large-scale mining corporations with products and services? as a form of economic livelihood. Again, we need to address issues of implementation of gender equal, policy, procurement policies by corporate actors in the mining sector. So there is a lot that still needs to be done to address the situation, and it is an opportunity for us now that we are going to be looking at more mining activities, and we have these strategic minerals in Zimbabwe like lithium and so forth. Let's utilize that opportunity to address the issues of gender equality in mining.
Thank you very much, Nyaradzo. She's talking about that. We ensure that there's equality for all. There's a gender balance within the extractive sector. The policies are there, but it's all on paper, and more needs to be done by the relevant authorities. We're still in the city of kings and queens on the sidelines of the Zimbabwe Alternative Mining Indaba, #Zami 2022. That's goodbye for now. Till we meet again.